So a little bit about how I ended up in this situation. When I was 7 years old, my mom unfortunately passed away. My dad was declared unfit due to a severe addiction to painkillers. I ended up living with my uncle Eric, his wife, and my cousin Jeremy. So fast forward 11 years. I was 18, Jeremy was 20. I just graduated from high school. Jeremy tells us that he's rented a trailer for the two of us and our girlfriends. I ask where. He tells me it's on Vancouver Island. We get on the ferry and get to our trailer. He tells us that he's been planning this whole trip for a while now as a big graduation present. We're set to be there for 2 weeks. We have our trailer parked in a pretty secluded and heavily wooded area. The first 4 nights are absolutely uneventful, but fun. We swam in a nearby lake. We roasted food over the fire. We dicked around in nature and hiked. It was a good time. Around the 5th day or so, my girlfriend, Sam, comes running to us one morning. She's scared and pale. I ask her what happened. She said that there was someone in the bushes. I ask her if she saw anything, any identifiable factors. She tells me no, but that it was definitely a person. Throughout the day, there does seem to be this aura of us being watched, not with a malicious intent, mind you, but not a friendly feeling either. As the day goes on, the feeling of being watched is not able to be shaken off. There's times when it feels less noticeable, if that's what you could call it, but it felt like the eyes in the woods were simply not paying that much attention during those times. So, fast forward to that night, we set up the pit to make dinner. We're right in the middle of eating when suddenly there's this very faint noise. It's rocks being smacked together. It's almost undeniably the sound of rocks being hit against each other, but it's so far off. It's creepy enough that Sam bolts for the inside of the trailer and locks herself in. At some point in the night, Jeremy's girlfriend Hannah decides it's her turn to go to bed as well. After that, Jeremy asks me if I want to go out into the woods to explore the source of the noise. I tell him that that could be very dangerous. He tells me that that's part of the fun. He shows me that he packed a shotgun just in case of wild animals. We take our flashlights and head off into the woods. Now it was very quiet, but not the kind of everything stops quiet, just like an eerie silence, kind of silence where you're waiting in anticipation for something to happen. We explore for a good 15 to 30 minutes and find pretty much nothing. We head back, disappointed. Once we get back to the trailer, we head in and sit down for a bit when something does happen. A loud smack against the side of the trailer. We go out to see what happened. There's a huge-ass rock that got thrown at the side of the trailer. Jeremy and I shine lights into the immediate area, but we don't see anything. But there is the very obvious rustling of bushes and branches being snapped. Someone is running away. The next day comes. We head out into the woods again. Jeremy is still armed. We head for the direction where we heard the branches being snapped. Whoever it was that was out there just straight annihilated some bushes, like ran straight through them. At this point, I want to not go any further. Jeremy tells me that he'll go and find whoever's out there if I'm too scared. I try and reason with him, like what if it's some crazy person in the woods? We argue a bit, and I head back to the trailer. A good 45 minutes to an hour passes, and I hear someone running. But this time, it's Jeremy, and he's hauling ass. Jeremy fumbles as he's running inside. He's the palest I've ever seen him. He's aiming his shotgun from the inside and shaking. It's a few hours of tension as he seems to be waiting for what he ran from. After he's sure that who or whatever he was running from didn't follow, he's still rattled, breathing heavily. I asked him what happened out in the woods. He says, "Dude, something tried to grab me." I repeated, "Grab you?" He tells me that he only got the glimpse of a person, a big person too, as its hands were massive. He could feel the fingers draping over his shoulder. For reference, we are both 6'2". The grip almost tightened when he jumped back in panic and bolted as fast as he could run. He never got a good look at the face, but this person to him was quite tall, at least a foot or two above him at his estimate. The girls are frightened. I'm frightened, and Jeremy just keeps looking out the window to see if it came back to follow him. But nothing comes, and this goes on until we anxiously make dinner. Jeremy keeps the shotgun on him at all times now. Every little noise that he hears, there's a cause for him to start aiming. At one point, a small bird made a noise, and he obliterated it with the gun at point-blank range. But I digress. We're eating. Still no activity. It's around 1:30 to 2 a.m. now, roughly, when we're all woken up by this sound. Someone is howling, or screaming, or something. It's more like a bellow. This lasts a few minutes, and then stops. There's some intermittent hollers as well. The hollers are short and high-pitched. The bellows are deeper. This continues on and off throughout the night. About a full week into our trip, we're terrified, scared, and ready to just go. It's this night that something new starts happening. The sound of something hard being smacked against a tree. Jeremy's educated guess is that it's some kind of large piece of wood, like a branch. This thwacking sound is harsh and violent. There's no way you couldn't hear it. Jeremy snaps off a branch of his own to start responding. The thwacking goes back and forth between the two of them for a bit, maybe 3 hours. After all of that, nothing. We're all unable to sleep that night. It's been about 2 days after that, and nothing has happened. We think that maybe we talked it out. This would turn out to not be the case. It's late one night, and we're preparing for bed when we start hearing some noise. It's rocks. Rocks of various sizes being pelted against the trailer. Jeremy grabs his shotgun and heads out, just itching to shoot at something. He starts shooting randomly. It doesn't seem like he ever hit anything. The rock pelting keeps going on for over an hour, stops, and then resumes. Like the bellows, this is also an off and on occurrence. The next morning, we start looking to see where this person could be hiding this entire time. We're not expecting to see it. There's this huge, fur-covered person, I guess. It's about our size, and it's staring us dead on. Jeremy lines himself up to shoot it. Not sure how or why, but he misses the shot. We get a holler for our trouble before it runs off into the woods. We tell the girls what happened. They're obviously freaked the hell out. Night comes, and like the nights before, there's violent thwacking of branches against trees. It's loud, and it's angry sounding. I say out loud, "Hey Jeremy, I think we pissed it off." The knocking stops. For some reason, we're absolutely scared shitless. After a few hours of complete silence, we hear a massive thud, and another, and then another. It's more rocks, bigger ones too. All 4 of us head out, Jeremy armed with a shotgun. The girls and I have flashlights. That's when Sam screams bloody murder. She bolts faster than a track star, her way back inside. Jeremy tries to take a shot. I grab the light that she dropped. He's massive, taller than the one that we saw in the daytime. The best I could compare it to is if you added a few inches to someone like Shaq. With what brief glimpse I got of its face, it's snarling, like it's pissed. My only thought is, shit, there's 2 of them. One smaller, and the bigger one. Those are the only 2 we can see, or the ones we know of. The larger one is bold enough to show itself. We do not sleep at all the next few nights. It's our last night before we go back. It's peaceful and quiet. We're all suspicious. As we're packing our stuff and leaving, we see the larger one in broad daylight. Just a brief few seconds though. It stares us down as we leave. We all get back home, and the first thing that me and Jeremy do, because our house is kinda in the woods, is lock all the doors out of fear. Me and Jeremy still had sleepless nights for months after that. Every little sound startled the hell out of us. The girls were like this too. A few years after what happened, Jeremy got into Sasquatch research. He's determined to shoot one. Me and Sam stayed together and eventually got married. Despite what all happened, I still enjoy the outdoors. I just carry a firearm on me now, and a knife, in the event that I see one of those things again, even though I hope not to. So I've posted this story anonymously on the internet before, but I figure I want to share it again. I'm sharing it pretty much for the sake of conversation, and maybe some entertainment for some people. And before anyone asks, I do have some intention to return to the area of the incident. Maybe not now, but sometime later. So you can go ahead and call me crazy, or call me a schizo, or tell me I'm lying, but I don't really care. I'm going to try and remove as much gun and marksmanship related subjects from the story as possible, and just stick to the parts that would be more understandable to you all. But given that I'm kind of weird, and given my military experience, I'm far more familiar with writing a report than some kind of narrative or a story, so it may come across as boring. So this happened between Friday and Saturday night, February 24th, 2017. Some information about me. I was 25 years old then. I joined the army at 18, and I did a single tour in Iraq in 2014, before being honorably discharged due to heart arrhythmia in 2015. On the day of the incident, I had 3 other friends with me. There was Barney, another friend from the military, only we met after we returned to civilian life. Barney is older and has been to combat engagements, given that he served in the Marines, and at the time was about 29. Lambert, another mutual friend of ours who wanted to learn how to shoot guns, so we took him along. Joe, a friend of ours and the son of the gun store owner that we buy all of our guns from. And Kevin, a nerdy friend who's never shot anything in his entire life and could probably be knocked out by a strong wind, but we took him along. We headed out in the morning, about 7:15 a.m., to White River National Forest. We drove for some miles before parking. Then we hiked in some more, then proceeded to set up camp in our designated spot. This wasn't a hunting trip, as it wasn't hunting season. It's quite chilly at this point in the year, but we had bought a lot of gear, and we just wanted to chill out, shoot targets, and have some beer with friends. Still, I had packed a Glock 20 and a Henry all-weather rifle in 45-70 for fear of bears and mountain lions. I had also brought, for the fun of shooting part, my Lee Enfield rifle that I had been gifted by my dad. I also had a Remington shotgun stashed on my truck from a previous hunting trip. My friend Barney had also packed a Mossberg shotgun with some slugs. Joe had brought an AR-15, and Lambert just had a bow. And since he was going to learn how to shoot, we armed him with a 12-shot 38 Special lever rifle that I had never heard about that Joe had procured for the occasion. I should also mention that we had women with us as well, but for the sake of their privacy, I won't introduce them. We set up camp around 11 a.m. Barney set up to prepare a fire and ready us lunch while Joe cleaned up the area. Myself, Lambert, and the girls went to check out a stream and just hike a bit. We returned at 1300. We ate, screwed around for a bit, and then set out to hike again. This time, we brought along our guns and the stuff that we were going to shoot at. We found our suitable spot at around 15:15. After much goofing around, we We eventually started putting rounds on our targets, which were old cups and plates that we had brought for the occasion, until we got tired of it. It was about 17:45 when we decided to return to the camp for cozy drinking time by the fire. As we left, Barney lagged behind a bit as he was picking up some brass and shells from the ground. He was maybe about 100 feet behind us when I turned around to call to him. I saw Barney standing there, looking diagonally from the path that we took. He looked stupidly confused and at the same time startled, so I turned back to see what was up. At around 1900, Joe caught sight of a large figure moving about the edge of the camp. We presumed it was the bear, but given that we had fire, numbers, and guns, we stood easy. At around 1915, Barney had also caught the sight of the animal circling the perimeter as light shone on it immediately. Barney commented that it was the weirdest bear he's ever seen. It had a very bear-like appearance, but it seemed weird, hunched over way too much, and there was something very off to its appearance. Around 1918, I had seen it too. Like Joe said, it looked much like a bear, but there were things that were off about it. For one, this animal was huge. Black bears are big, but this one was almost the size of a grizzly. Also, it was much more muscular. It hunched over a lot and drooped its head, but it also stood powerfully with its forelegs straight while its hind legs were crouched low. The fur seemed thick, and the animal had a kind of short mane to it, but it also thinned down a lot on its limbs and the lower body. The facial profile was also kind of different. Bears have a familiar, quote, bearish face that makes you think that they're cute and lovable. This animal looked mean, as if its sole existence was to kill and eat things. I actually mean it looked mean. Its snout was shorter, yet thicker. Think of a Tibetan Mastiff, minus the adorableness. Its ears were round like a bear's, but a bit pointier, looking like more that of a raccoon. Around its neck, the black fur became reddish, and the thing drooled everywhere. Movement-wise, it had that certainty of movement and grace, like that of a large hunting dog, not that loose gait of a bear. We were getting pretty nervous at this time. We had fired a few warning shots to scare it away, but from time to time, it would dart into sight, back and forth at the very edge of our camp. I could make out its shape perfectly against the night sky, and I kept trying to make up my mind on what the hell kind of bear this was. I was so tired of that bullshit. I picked up the Henry and took aim. I had decided it was better to explain that I had bagged an aggressive animal out of precaution than getting charged in the night. The weird bear had popped into the edge of the light again, so I put my sights right below his shoulder area and pulled the trigger. The gun kicked up, and when I sighted again, I caught a look of the thing, running first to the side, and then out of sight, back to the woods. We settled back down for a few minutes. The girls were pretty shaken up by now. Joe wanted to go track the beast down, but it was night and cold, and we were all a bit shaken up by now. No bear was going to come back after a 45-70 hit, even if it somehow avoided having a hole explode in its chest upon being hit. The sound alone would scare any predator. Suddenly, Barney leapt up with my Enfield in hand and fired at one of our tents. The girl started screaming. I turned up to see right behind us, about 30 feet away, was another one of these things. Reflex kicked in, and I opened up twice with the Henry. The thing turned and booked it back to the woods in the blink of an eye, while doing so and leaving a trail of blood and feces. Barney got up and kicked some more wood into the fire. We knew that something was up then, because what had just happened was a pack hunting strategy. One animal drew our attention, while its mate snuck up from behind. We concluded that these were either sick or starving predators given their appearance, and that they were actively trying to hunt down our numerous and well-armed group. Me and Barney decided that enough was enough and that it was time to roll out. We would send Joe and Lambert ahead of us with a torch and with the girls. Now that the animals had been scared away, Joe was a fantastic shooter and a great hunter, so we knew that he was up to the task. And after they reached the truck, Joe would drive the girls and Lambert down to a park ranger station and then return with the guns and pick us up in the morning. Me and Barney would stick behind to pack our stuff and serve as distractions in case the things came back. Our truck was parked east, and since these animals had come from both the north and the south, and one of them had fled southwest, we presumed that if they weren't dead, that they would approach from any direction from the 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Thus, if the animals returned to camp and found no one there and decided to give chase, they'd catch up to the group relatively helpless in the middle of the trail, in the dark. Hence, we decided to stick behind, make noise, and throw more wood into the fire to draw them in if necessary. We'd sit out in a tree until morning and then leave with everything. I gave Joe the Henry because he would need the extra firepower if the animals ignored us and came from them. Barney handed his Mossberg to Lambert and gave Kevin a .357 snub that he had for CCW. This left me with my Glock 20 and the Enfield, and Barney with Joe's AR. We let one of the girls keep the weird 38 lever action. As they left, me and Barney gathered up all the ammo and put a few essentials on our packs in case we had to leg it into the forest. I took our used clothing and the girls' clothing and tossed it inside of a tent, being careful to leave some out in the open. Barney kicked open our icebox and fished out a large pork rib that we had brought for that night's barbecue. He smeared it on the tents and then hung it above the fire to smoke, causing the smell to rise up. Yes, we wanted to kill one of these things by now, but hey, if they didn't show up, at least we'd have a meal. Now, our plan did backfire, in the sense that we had set ourselves up in a large and tall pine tree up east. While it did render us invisible and provided comfortable and somewhat secure seats from a large giant man-eating mutated werewolf bear thing, it provided a terrible spot to shoot from, given that we were at the risk of falling off at any time if we lost our balance. Hence, Barney tied us up to the trunk. The basic plan: if those bear things come back, we wait for them to start messing with the camp, and then mag dump or shoot as much as we can into them. If we bag at least one, the other ones will leave us alone, and the rangers will have an easier time finding us and them if it's wounded. It was about 2100, and I had almost fallen asleep listening to some Joe Rogan rant on my phone when Barney elbowed me. I took out my earbuds and listened. Heavy footsteps and low growls. Those bear things were directly underneath of us. I wondered if they had caught our scent and would come up the tree, but then Barney whispered that they came from the east and from behind us, the direction that the group had set out in. It either meant that they had caught up with the group or that Joe had scared them away. We hadn't heard any gunshots though. Or that the smart bastards were changing their strategy. They moved up to the camp and we waited for clear shots. I'll reiterate now everything that I've said about their presence. Two of them, who looked exactly the same, but one was smaller than the other, possibly a male and a female. As soon as they had reached what I assumed to be the perfect range, and moved close enough together so that they lined up perfectly for Barney's AR, I fired the first shot. Barney mag dumped on semi-auto in sequence. One of the things got hit in the back, and it booked it to the woods due west. The other turned to stare for a moment. I shone my light in its face, and Barney gave it the 1-2 tap. It got hit in the belly area, and the thing roared before booking it south. I scanned the area with my light for the next hour while Barney decided to try to phone Joe. After a few attempts, Barney got through to Joe, who had left the group with a large party of campers that they had found along the way after telling them to get to a park ranger office, and he was returning with Lambert to pick us up. He'd try and reach the camp with the truck this time so we wouldn't have to risk another walk in the dark. As soon as Barney put down the phone, I felt something flying amazingly fast past my head and bonked the pine tree with force. It was a rock the size of my fist, and it had come up somewhere down by my left. I had barely completed that sentence when a stick hit me in the forehead. I blind fired at random and tried to duck to hug the tree limb that I was sitting on, but being tied to Barney, that was impossible. Meanwhile, Barney was also getting peppered with pine cones, sticks, and rocks. These things were picking up rocks and sticks and throwing them at us. We yelled at each other, "What the hell?" several times while firing at random and getting bombarded with rocks. Deciding what was happening was simply impossible until they threw our icebox at us. Barney yanked out his knife and cut the belt that tied us together. We both hugged the tree limbs for cover, and yet still they bombarded us. A stone hit me in the small of my back, and I lost all my air. Barney got hit in the head and yelled out, "F it," and jumped down from the tree. I sat up and shone my light around, intending to give Barney some line of sight in case one of the things charged at him on the ground. As soon as I heard him yell my name, I made my way down until I could jump down safely. Barney just tossed himself off of a 3-story tall tree basically. We hit the ground and legged it down the trail. I took point with the infield, and Barney watched from behind as his gun was more suitable for mag dumping while we ran away. About 20 minutes later, I heard something crash through the branches to my right, the north, so I turned and shone my light on one of the things running parallel to us. I yelled, "Left," and shot the thing in the side. It fell down with a thud and rolled out of sight. As I turned right to see Barney sighting down the big one who was coming at us from that direction, I pointed and fired. Barney opened up with the AR. He got about 4 rounds off before it jammed up. I pulled up the Glock and just fired blindly, thinking that the thing was upon me. I fired about 3 shots, and I felt my butthole unclench given the relief that the thing was nowhere to be seen. Me and Barney then took off into a dead sprint on the direction that we thought the trail was in. We fell about 10 times and kept pushing through, and then all of a sudden we started to hear a loud noise gaining on us and felt that something was coming at us from behind. Tired and out of air, we turned to blind fire, but then we see the truck approaching us from the trail. We booked it back, and while I jumped in the back seat, Barney simply dove or jumped or tossed himself like a sack into the back of the truck. Joe sped off as me and Lambert dragged the dead tired Barney in through the rear window. As we pull in his last leg, I look at the edge of the woods, and I see the big one prancing there, heavy breathing, causing a thick fog to come out of its nose. Its fur was covered in blood from where we had hit him. It bared its teeth at us and then disappeared, maybe finally scared by the truck. We drove far enough that we encountered the campers that Joe had left the party with. They had been trying to reach the Rangers by phone. After taking a look at me and Barney, wounded and all torn up from the rocks and falling down every 2 seconds, they decided to take our word for it and leave the area because of these rock-throwing mutant bear werewolves. We all headed down to the first ranger station at one of the entrances. The first ranger that we talked to, an old grizzled dude, writes down everything and puts a call on the radio. He thinks that we've encountered some black bears infected with rabies. No explanation for the throwing of rocks. No explanation why nobody could hear the Third Battle of Fallujah taking place a few miles over. The chief ranger, or whatever his title was, comes in and asks us to stay the night. Joe calls his dad, and he shows up to pick everyone up that isn't staying so we can have the truck to head back to the campsite. We keep the guns on us. Of course, the Rangers seem to understand, even though they don't quite believe the story. Anyway, we had a good night by the fireplace, drinking whiskey and sipping chicken broth and hearing old Ranger stories from the old Ranger dude. I even fell asleep on the couch by the fire. It was, in a weird way, the best night of my life, even though that I was nearly murdered by a rock-throwing mutant bear werewolf. The next morning, we are accompanied by 3 additional Rangers. Nobody is buying our story, even though Barney has a stone-shaped red imprint on his forehead, and they were sticking to the bear with rabies theory. However, I did notice that they were quite well armed for people who thought that they were going after a simple black bear. One Ranger had a Marlin rifle chambered in .308. Another had a Red Hawk Alaskan on a chest holster, .454 Casual, and the final one carried a .44 Henry. Our campground was completely demolished. Our tents had been torn and thrown around. All the food was gone, including all the beer. The pork ribs were stolen, of course, and our clothing was littered everywhere. Luckily, none of the clothing had been damaged, really at all, and the Rangers helped us gather stuff up like wallets and phones that had been left behind. On the way over, we did find tracks. They looked like bear-like tracks, but they were different. There was dried-up blood and fur, and a bunch of our casings. I also showed the Ranger the tree that we had hid in, and how the ground around it was littered with rocks and sticks, and how our icebox was stuck on a branch halfway up. They concluded that it was bears, possibly grizzlies, but they were black, and they weren't grizzlies. They were still sticking with the rabies thing, but we know this not to be true. Then, they ordered us to pick up our casings on the trail back. One of these days, I plan to go back, if anything, just for pictures and for documentation purposes. I'm not going to spend the night, although Barney is coming, and he's willing to camp out there if we can find a lot more people and bring a lot more guns. If that ends up being the case, I probably could set up trip cameras. I'll borrow them from my dad, if it isn't snowing too badly. I'm positive that those things were not bears, and I can't explain how they didn't die or get scared after getting shot so many times by relatively large caliber bullets. I'm not even sure if it was only 2, or if we actually killed 1 or 2, and we were set upon by others. Or maybe I'm just a terrible shot under pressure and I missed everything. I don't know. So a little bit about how I ended up in this situation. When I was 7 years old, my mom unfortunately passed away. My dad was declared unfit due to a severe addiction to painkillers. I ended up living with my uncle Eric, his wife, and my cousin Jeremy. So fast forward 11 years. I was 18, Jeremy was 20. I just graduated from high school. Jeremy tells us that he's rented a trailer for the 2 of us and our girlfriends. I ask where. He tells me it's on Vancouver Island. We get on the ferry and get to our trailer. He tells us that he's been planning this whole trip for a while now as a big graduation present. We're set to be there for 2 weeks. We have our trailer parked in a pretty secluded and heavily wooded area. The first 4 nights are absolutely uneventful, but fun. We swam in a nearby lake. We roasted food over the fire. We dicked around in nature and hiked. It was a good time. Around the 5th day or so, my girlfriend, Sam, comes running to us one morning. She's scared and pale. I ask her what happened. She said that there was someone in the bushes. I ask her if she saw anything, any identifiable factors. She tells me no, but that it was definitely a person. Throughout the day, There does seem to be this aura of us being watched, not with a malicious intent, mind you, but not a friendly feeling either. As the day goes on, the feeling of being watched is not able to be shaken off. There's times when it feels less noticeable, if that's what you could call it, but it felt like the eyes in the woods were simply not paying that much attention during those times. So, fast forward to that night, we set up the pit to make dinner. We're right in the middle of eating when suddenly there's this very faint noise. It's rocks being smacked together. It's almost undeniably the sound of rocks being hit against each other, but it's so far off. It's creepy enough that Sam bolts for the inside of the trailer and locks herself in. At some point in the night, Jeremy's girlfriend Hannah decides it's her turn to go to bed as well. After that, Jeremy asks me if I want to go out into the woods to explore the source of the noise. I tell him that that could be very dangerous. He tells me that that's part of the fun. He shows me that he packed a shotgun just in case of wild animals. We take our flashlights and head off into the woods. Now it was very quiet, but not the kind of everything stops quiet, just like an eerie silence, kind of silence where you're waiting in anticipation for something to happen. We explore for a good 15 to 30 minutes and find pretty much nothing. We head back, disappointed. Once we get back to the trailer, we head in and sit down for a bit when something does happen. A loud smack against the side of the trailer. We go out to see what happened. There's a huge-ass rock that got thrown at the side of the trailer. Jeremy and I shine lights into the immediate area, but we don't see anything. But there is the very obvious rustling of bushes and branches being snapped. Someone is running away. The next day comes. We head out into the woods again. Jeremy is still armed. We head for the direction where we heard the branches being snapped. Whoever it was that was out there just straight annihilated some bushes, like ran straight through them. At this point, I want to not go any further. Jeremy tells me that he'll go and find whoever's out there if I'm too scared. I try and reason with him, like what if it's some crazy person in the woods? We argue a bit, and I head back to the trailer. A good 45 minutes to an hour passes, and I hear someone running. But this time, it's Jeremy, and he's hauling ass. Jeremy fumbles as he's running inside. He's the palest I've ever seen him. He's aiming his shotgun from the inside and shaking. It's a few hours of tension as he seems to be waiting for what he ran from. After he's sure that who or whatever he was running from didn't follow, he's still rattled, breathing heavily. I asked him what happened out in the woods. He says, "Dude, something tried to grab me." I repeated, "Grab you?" He tells me that he only got the glimpse of a person, a big person too, as its hands were massive. He could feel the fingers draping over his shoulder. For reference, we are both 6'2". The grip almost tightened when he jumped back in panic and bolted as fast as he could run. He never got a good look at the face, but this person to him was quite tall, at least a foot or two above him at his estimate. The girls are frightened. I'm frightened, and Jeremy just keeps looking out the window to see if it came back to follow him. But nothing comes, and this goes on until we anxiously make dinner. Jeremy keeps the shotgun on him at all times now. Every little noise that he hears, there's a cause for him to start aiming. At one point, a small bird made a noise, and he obliterated it with the gun at point-blank range. But I digress. We're eating. Still no activity. It's around 1:30 to 2 a.m. now, roughly, when we're all woken up by this sound. Someone is howling, or screaming, or something. It's more like a bellow. This lasts a few minutes, and then stops. There's some intermittent hollers as well. The hollers are short and high-pitched. The bellows are deeper. This continues on and off throughout the night. About a full week into our trip, we're terrified, scared, and ready to just go. It's this night that something new starts happening. The sound of something hard being smacked against a tree. Jeremy's educated guess is that it's some kind of large piece of wood, like a branch. This thwacking sound is harsh and violent. There's no way you couldn't hear it. Jeremy snaps off a branch of his own to start responding. The thwacking goes back and forth between the two of them for a bit, maybe 3 hours. After all of that, nothing. We're all unable to sleep that night. It's been about 2 days after that, and nothing has happened. We think that maybe we talked it out. This would turn out to not be the case. It's late one night, and we're preparing for bed when we start hearing some noise. It's rocks. Rocks of various sizes being pelted against the trailer. Jeremy grabs his shotgun and heads out, just itching to shoot at something. He starts shooting randomly. It doesn't seem like he ever hit anything. The rock pelting keeps going on for over an hour, stops, and then resumes. Like the bellows, this is also an off and on occurrence. The next morning, we start looking to see where this person could be hiding this entire time. We're not expecting to see it. There's this huge, fur-covered person, I guess. It's about our size, and it's staring us dead on. Jeremy lines himself up to shoot it. Not sure how or why, but he misses the shot. We get a holler for our trouble before it runs off into the woods. We tell the girls what happened. They're obviously freaked the hell out. Night comes, and like the nights before, there's violent thwacking of branches against trees. It's loud, and it's angry sounding. I say out loud, "Hey Jeremy, I think we pissed it off." The knocking stops. For some reason, we're absolutely scared shitless. After a few hours of complete silence, we hear a massive thud, and another, and then another. It's more rocks, bigger ones too. All 4 of us head out, Jeremy armed with a shotgun. The girls and I have flashlights. That's when Sam screams bloody murder. She bolts faster than a track star, her way back inside. Jeremy tries to take a shot. I grab the light that she dropped. He's massive, taller than the one that we saw in the daytime. The best I could compare it to is if you added a few inches to someone like Shaq. With what brief glimpse I got of its face, it's snarling, like it's pissed. My only thought is, shit, there's 2 of them. One smaller, and the bigger one. Those are the only 2 we can see, or the ones we know of. The larger one is bold enough to show itself. We do not sleep at all the next few nights. It's our last night before we go back. It's peaceful and quiet. We're all suspicious. As we're packing our stuff and leaving, we see the larger one in broad daylight. Just a brief few seconds though. It stares us down as we leave. We all get back home, and the first thing that me and Jeremy do, because our house is kinda in the woods, is lock all the doors out of fear. Me and Jeremy still had sleepless nights for months after that. Every little sound startled the hell out of us. The girls were like this too. A few years after what happened, Jeremy got into Sasquatch research. He's determined to shoot one. Me and Sam stayed together and eventually got married. Despite what all happened, I still enjoy the outdoors. I just carry a firearm on me now, and a knife, in the event that I see one of those things again, even though I hope not to. I started a new job in an old building with a cool coworker. He's a stoner dude who's really into the paranormal and tells me that this building is haunted. I ask how he knows. He proceeds to tell me he's very sensitive to spirits and shit because he was possessed in high school. I'm going to tell his story from his perspective. When I was 17 in high school, I was a choir boy. I was on a trip to Montana. I can't remember where. We were staying at some really run-down style motel for the night. The guys are separated from the girls. I'm with 2 guys I know and 1 other dude. Instantly, we all noticed the same thing. There's child-sized ash handprints on the ceiling. We noticed that any time we stand under the handprints, it gets very hot, which is very weird because everywhere else in this hotel room is cold as hell. My close friend wants to mess around and pulls out, no shit, a Ouija board. Everyone but me chickens out. I put my hands on the board, skeptical as hell, and mocking the whole thing. He says, if there are any spirits in this room, make yourself known. 5 minutes of dead silence pass, and he repeats himself, if there are any spirits in this room, make your presence known. Same deal, no reply. I take both hands off of the board. This was a bad idea. I instantly feel strange, hot, and sweaty, with a raging headache. I put my hands back on the board and start to feel better. I figure it's just my nerves. I'll never know why I did this, but for some reason I looked up from the board and said that if there were any spirits in that building, then they could use my body as a vessel. A wave of heat hits me hard. I black out. I wake up and see the clock. I was out for 45 minutes. I think, what the hell? 2 guy friends are on the bed watching TV, obviously avoiding eye contact, and nervous as hell. My close friend is across from me, crying really hard. In the 10 years I've known this kid, I've never seen him cry once. I ask, what happened? Are you okay? He proceeds to tell me that during my blackout, I screamed and shook for a while. I also eventually said to him in a low, raspy voice that it was his fault that his friend drowned. He's never told anybody that he had a friend who drowned. We don't talk about this for a while. Things are okay for about 2 months. So 2 months later, everything's been calm, and I've barely thought about the experience ever again. I was living in a nice 2-floor house with my parents. They were very Mormon, and my brother. So me and him were playing Halo and getting stoned one day. I start to get that really hot feeling again. I look over to my bro, and standing over him is a creepy 7-foot tall old man. This thing has sunken eyes, pale skin, and about 3 teeth, smiling like the Joker at me. He's wearing a pair of dark jeans, black work boots, and a tucked-in dark blue dress shirt, and this weird black Men in Black style fedora. My only thoughts are, what the hell? What the hell? I jump back in my chair for a bit, but I'm too awestruck to make a noise. My brother says, man, what's going on? Not even noticing. I say, dude, you see him, right? My brother says, don't even F with me like that. I'm not stupid. The old man vanishes into thin air. I was pretty freaked out, but I chalk it up to that I was just high and hallucinating, not enough sleep. I try to forget about the incident. After this happens though, creepy shit starts going on in the house constantly. Doors begin to close by themselves. Noises only I can hear late at night. Lamps and lights turning back on after I've turned them off. Stuff like that. But what really freaks me out is that it feels like I'm seeing this old man everywhere. I would be walking around in public after school just hanging out, and I'd see him at the corner of my eye. I would only ever see him in the same 2 outfits, either the first one I described or a long black creepy trench coat. This goes on for a while, progressively getting more and more frequent. I don't tell my parents because they're Mormon and would freak the F out if I told them that I was ever playing around with demons and shit. One night, I get up to go to the bathroom, and I see a red light coming from under my brother's door. I hear him talking to someone for a little while before I hear a low guttural voice respond. The voice seems to be speaking in Latin. I take notes of it on my phone. I'm not doing that. He's my brother. I was really freaked out. I go back to my room and don't sleep. I look up the Latin words in the morning. The demon said, "Bring death upon him." My brother says that he slept all night and didn't even have a dream related to what I mentioned. Finally, after a few weeks of this going on, my parents are out of town, leaving me and my brother home alone for a whole week. Shit starts to get really bad. I decide to tell my brother about it. He's super understanding, and he gets why I've been acting weird. We decide to do something about it. We do a little bit more research into demonology. I look up the description of the old man that's been following me, and the closest thing I could find was a demon whose name I can't remember. This thing is supposed to be super powerful and evil as all hell. To cut it short, me and my brother ended up getting into contact with a Catholic priest who blessed my house in the traditional way. I figured it was the wise way to go. The Catholics usually have the best methods on getting rid of these things. The entire time we do this, I can feel the presence getting angry. The temperature in the house is rising, and I'm feeling terrible. We complete the blessing, and everything gets quiet. Suddenly, my back is burning and stinging. My brother lifts my shirt. There's 3 huge, distinct, bloody cuts down my back. After the priest leaves, everything returns to normal. My parents return. I never tell them about any of this. Nothing else happens. It was finally over. The guy telling me this story was a little nervous the whole time, but I guess after all of this, he became super sensitive to spirits and is super into paranormal stuff now. Anyway, that's it. Alright, let me give you a story about something freaky that happened on my farm in 2012. I was a 17-year-old farm boy back then. Our place was about a mile from the nearest neighbor and 10 miles from the nearest town. My parents had taken a trip with my aunt to Vegas for a week and left me to run the place with the dogs. There had always been some weird stuff going on around the farm. Animals going missing, animals turning up, torn to pieces, weird tracks, all that stuff. Dad and Grandpa always told me that it was coyotes, but after I had gotten a bit older, they told me that there had also been sightings of bobcats and mountain lions back in the area for the first time in over 50 years, but the boys down at the DNR would never admit it, even with trail cam footage of them. At this time, I had been taking nightly walks for a couple of years, but never farther than the big lamplight would show. One night, I start walking and go away from the farm and the light. It was a full moon, and there was fresh snow on the ground. Everything was clear for miles, and you could see that it was almost like daylight. Something possessed my dumb ass to go out there in the middle of winter by myself. My dogs would usually come with me on little walks like this, but they were nowhere to be found. I figured they were out hunting little rodents or something, so I left without them. I walked the path along our empty cornfields and down the path that led to our pasture. It was about a quarter mile of a downhill walk. Down in this pasture, there is a canyon and a creek that runs through the whole thing. It goes from the end of our property all the way up to the next county. Inside of this, there is a pretty sizable forest with huge, old-growth trees that go all the way down. It was one of those places that was perfect to grow up near. I spent a lot of time down there throughout my life, and I've never had anything out of the ordinary happen there. I had my headphones in, and I was vibing to some Hammerfall. I was just enjoying how cool everything was and how lit up everything seemed. It was magical, even past the tree line. I figured that me being just over 6 feet tall and an overly cocky weightlifter, that I didn't have to worry about anything out there. So as you can imagine, dumbass me went down next to the creek bed in the middle of winter, alone and unarmed. Mistake number 1. I followed the creek for a ways until I ended up at a part of the bed where the banks and walls of this little canyon were angled to climb up, and there weren't any paths out. I stopped for a little bit and watched the moon and stars, just admiring it all. I don't think I'll ever forget how pretty everything was. About that time, I ended up turning my music off just to take it all in. I guess it wasn't cold enough for the creek to freeze all the way, and every little sound out there in this place just echoed on top of the little sounds of the running water. The whole place just made every one of my senses feel exaggerated. I stood there for about a minute or two when I started to get this horrible feeling in the pit of my gut, like the most terrible thing in the world was about to happen any second. I looked around a bit, and I didn't want to freak myself out over nothing, so I gave it a short time. This was mistake number 2. I should have just walked my ass out of there. At this point, I started to hear something moving through the snow and brush on the other side of the creek. The only sounds were those exaggeratedly amped up steps, causing the thin coat of the ice to crack and snap on the long grass near the shore. I won't lie, every horror story and terrible thing I've ever heard ran through my head, and I ended up just being stuck there, unable to move away, while this thing continued to creep out along the bank. I hadn't even seen it very clearly, and I just had the worst fear that I have ever had in my life to this day. Finally, this thing came out, and by God, I almost pissed myself. This big black dog-looking creature came crawling out of the creek on all fours. It was so big I don't even know how the hell it moved so quietly. It kept walking along in the open before it stuck its muzzle down in the creek and started to drink. I just stood there, glued to my spot. The whole place seemed to get darker with every second. About this time, I felt the cold for the first time that night, while this chill ran down my spine, and stupid me shivered. Mistake number 3. I had big copper buttons on my coat, and a couple of them brushed against each other. It had to be such an insignificant sound, but down there, it seemed like I had hit a tin roof with a hammer. This thing perked its ears up and raised its head to look at me. God, its eyes. I had never seen anything that green before. We stared each other down for a few moments, and then this thing growled. About this point, I finally snapped out of it and began to back away, trying to get out of this boxed-in space and away from this thing. This thing started to bare its teeth and growl more aggressively, and then I shit you not, it stood up on its hind legs, raising its front paws up to its sides. Only they didn't look like paws. They were like hands. I thought I was going crazy or something, but I kept slowly backing off, every step getting a little closer to the path leading out of the canyon and creek. But even then, I still had a long way back to the house. This thing just kept watching me, like it wanted me to just back away and leave for the first few steps. And then it started walking along the other side of the creek, matching my pace, just slowly stalking me out. I was breathing heavily, but somehow I managed to not lose my cool and run. I think if I had done that, I wouldn't have made it out. Finally, I made it to an open area and just had to get up this little hill and make it across the pasture. Then it was only a quarter of a mile and up another hill to home. I didn't turn my back on this thing, and I continued to back my way out and up the hill. This thing didn't seem to want to cross over the creek from the position it was at, but it kept walking. About the time that I had made it to the top and was looking down at this dog-man thing, it had made it to a more shallow spot down at the creek and began to cross. At this point, I knew I had to pick up the pace. I finally turned around and began quickly walking back to the pasture gate as fast as I could. I scrambled over the gate and looked back again. It was at the top, on all fours again, still watching me with those eyes and teeth. All that was between me and this thing was a barbed wire fence, a panel gate, and about 20 yards. That's when I heard one of the best sounds I've ever heard in my life. Loud patting coming across the field. All 3 of my dogs were coming at full speed, raising hell. I looked back, and this thing turned and stalked back down the smaller hill. I figured I was in the clear and took off like a rocket. I ran a quarter mile in nearly 4 inches of snow in winter gear. I passed my dogs on the way up, and they didn't stop or turn to meet me. They just bolted down the way after this thing. What felt like an hour of running up this hill, I made it back to my house, and I almost passed out on the floor. I locked the doors and ran to grab something to defend myself. I figured that my hunting knives weren't going to cut it, so I went to the gun safe. The only guns in the house are great-granddad's old double-barrel 20-gauge, a 22, a pump-action Remington, and a 30-06 with a box of 40-year-old ammo. I grabbed a shotgun and loaded 2 shells before shoving a couple of fistfuls into my pockets, and I just sat there in the kitchen with a death grip on this gun for hours before I finally heard my dogs barking outside the house. I looked out the window onto the porch and saw all 3 of them without a scratch. I dropped down to my ass and cried like a child, not sure what to think. I didn't want to go out there again, and I didn't until next morning. I stumbled out the door with the gun and looked around. My boys came up panting, with their tails wagging, and I loved on them and petted them until my body was numb from the cold. I made sure they got some hot meat that night as a thank you. I've seen this thing a few more times, but this was the first time. The only people who know about this are a couple of my closest friends, and now everyone here. It's a hell of a story. I don't live on the farm anymore at the moment, but that thing turned what was my little retreat into an absolute nightmare. This is a true event which has happened to me in 2015, and it's bothered me ever since. My parents were going through a divorce, so when I came back from university, the best place for me to live is usually my grandparents' place. My mother was a single mother when I was younger, so I grew up with my grandparents whilst my mother studied at university. And while at university, she got a first-class degree and a scholarship to do a master's and PhD. I'm really used to my grandparents' house. I was born there. I spent my childhood there until I was about 7 or 8. The house itself is quite large. In 1722, it was the site of stables. The garage, which is at the basement level underneath the house, still has rings bolted to the wall to tie your horse to, as well as troughs to put the hay and water in. In fact, again, not long ago, I found an old rusted horseshoe under a cobblestone which had worked its way loose. In 1815, the house was completely redone. The majority of the house stands from this date, without any major reworkings or renovations, other than interior decor. The large, high-ceilinged reception rooms, the hallways, the kitchen, and double staircase all remain. On the second floor, there are 4 bedrooms. 2 are located in what we jokingly refer to as the north wing, and 2 in the south wing. There are also a few bathrooms and 2 offices. One of the bedrooms leads into an office, and there's also a big attic. The garden is large and expansive, and it has some woodland with streams running through it, making it a haven for wildlife. There are some buildings, a dilapidated stable, and an old workshop about 300 meters from the main house. That's the house. It's been in our family since the 1880s. Several of our family members have lived and died in the house, all of them peacefully in their sleep. My great-grandmother died in the bedroom that I regularly sleep in. I've never felt threatened in the house. Basically, it's one of those houses that I can happily walk through in the dark. There are no feelings of malcontent. Until one week, I arrived at my grandparents' house. I had driven through the night from university and arrived in the early morning at about 4 a.m. The sun was hinting at its arrival in the sky, which was turning a pinkish blue. I parked my car and smoked a cigarette inside my car, as is my ritual. One cigarette inside the car after a long drive. With my cigarette finished, I kept the window open a little bit to air out the car. I collected my bags, went around to the back of the house, crossed the patio, and went up to the terrace. I opened the kitchen door. The kitchen is modern and has these big double doors that are mainly just glass. The front door, however, is old, and you can't close it without slamming it. It rattles all the panes and shakes the floors. I went up to my usual bedroom and fell asleep. I woke up about midday. My grandparents had gone on holiday and wouldn't be back for several days. Going downstairs, my youngest uncle, about 6 years older than me, and his girlfriend were there. We chatted about the drive and how things were going, until they left to go to central London. I had some cereal and then did university work for the rest of the day. My uncle texted me, saying that he'd be staying at hers, so I'd have the place to myself. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a loud double bang downstairs. I instantly knew what it was. It was those new kitchen drawers. They've got too much weight on them, so if you don't close them exactly, they slide open, slowly and then very quickly, until they're stopped by their mechanism. I just ignored this, and I went to sleep. The next day I went downstairs and I felt a bit peculiar when the drawers were all closed in the kitchen. I know what that sound is, and I know it was the drawers. Regardless, I hastened it out of my mind. I must have just imagined it. I did some piano practice on a lovely old piano that my great-great-grandmother bought and used to play. The ivory keys are still yellowed where her cigarettes, which I am told she held between her fingers as she played, or which dropped ash onto the keyboard as she held them tight between her lips. I love playing the piano there, because I can almost feel this pull to the piano, like the piano knows I'm related to its original owner, and the piano sings all the sweeter for it. A picture of the original owner looks over me with a Mona Lisa smile, a hint approvingly, a hint sternly, overall, a kind but matronly face. Halfway through some Sadie, I heard a crash again from the kitchen, the familiar double bang. This time, I went to the kitchen, and I made sure I closed the drawers exactly. That night, I heard the drawers make their double crash again. I went downstairs, and sure enough, they were wide open. I closed them, and worried in case they broke, I put chairs against them so they could not open again. I decided to go out for a cigarette. I only have one a day, usually after dinner, just a ritual I seem to have developed. I stood on the terrace and looked over the garden toward a small copse of woodland which is about 200 meters away. Suddenly, I saw something. Bright eyes, a reflection of an animal, probably a fox, looking at the garden, all lit up with patio lights. It's pretty common. As soon as I see them, they're gone. I went inside and locked up. I went to sleep. I was woken up halfway through the night by hearing the foxes again. They do it pretty regularly, so I'm used to it, although it's a weird noise, like a baby, people often say. The fox was really close to the house this time, just outside my window, when I suddenly heard the double crash from the kitchen. I shrugged it off as a spooky coincidence, and I went back to sleep. The next morning, I felt a draft, So I went downstairs to work out why it was so chilly in the house and windy. I went to the kitchen, and all the drawers were closed. Instead, the kitchen doors leading to the terrace and garden had a big smear on them, at about knee height. It looked like a kid had slobbered all over them. The door was now unlocked, which was weird, because I had definitely locked it. At the bottom of the stairs, leading from the terrace to the garden, was a dead fox. I surmised from its bloody face that it had maybe ran into the glass door, suffered some kind of fatal head injury, and then fallen down the stairs, compounding its injuries. I got an old sack, walked to the woodland about 50 meters across, and I dumped it there. The woodland, as I said, isn't big. It's about 50 meters across in this egg shape. From the middle of the copse, you can see out into the garden from most angles. As I walked out of the copse, I noticed a disturbance in the earth, fairly significant. It looked like a horse had been digging at the ground. I thought it may have been a badger and shrugged it off. When I went into the kitchen door, which I had closed, was wide open, and all the drawers were also wide open. The chairs were on the other side of the kitchen. I was majorly spooked. I got a knife from the drawer and investigated the house. Finding nothing, just some leaves, I closed the drawers and the kitchen doors. At this point, I was really quite anxious, just because it was getting a bit too coincidental for all the weird things to be happening at the same time. Still, it was only about 3 p.m., and I stopped feeling so freaked out by 5 p.m. I made myself some dinner, washed up, locked up, double-checking the lock in the kitchen doors. I went upstairs and went to sleep. As soon as I got into the bedroom, I could sense that something was off. The air was electric. I can't explain it. Something primal was telling me to just turn around and walk away. I ignored the feeling. It's my familial home, and goddamn it, I'll do as I wish. Any ghosts or spooks hanging around are most likely to be either related to me by blood and therefore benevolent, or of horses or animals. As I laid down and got comfortable, I began hearing scratches above me from the attic. Nothing big, just the sound of tiny pattering feet, like if a mole was shuffling through the boxes. We'd never had mice or rats before, but I decided that it was that. I had really vivid, brutal dreams that night. I dreamt about fighting for my life, fighting to the death. I brutally smashed somebody's face into a cement floor. Blood was everywhere. It was very unlike me to have these dreams. I never do. I woke up in a startle at about 5 a.m. The morning light was coming in, gray and listless, through the window. I instantly noticed that my bedroom door was wide open, and what I can only describe as a deer man was watching me. His head was a deer's, with antlers, but he had a human face. His torso was human, but his shoulders and arms were deer trotters. He had male human genitals, but his buttocks and legs were deer trotters. I looked at him. He looked at me for about 2 seconds. He was motionless. I felt terror rising, but I didn't feel threatened. I felt horror because it was not a normal thing to see, but I didn't feel as if the deer man wanted to hurt me. More like he was curious. After about 15 seconds, he turned and ducked behind the door toward the staircase. I heard the staircase groan and creak, but only as if a child was descending it. The deer man looked to me, as if he was perhaps 7 foot tall and 3 foot broad, and looked as if he'd weigh at least half a ton, but the staircase gave no indication of any weight, other than a child slowly going down the stairs. At this point, I began praying. I said the Lord's Prayer over and over in my head. I'm not religious. I'm agnostic. I made up prayers. I watched where the deer man had been, and I prayed for 20 minutes. Eventually, I went downstairs. There was no sign that I had had any kind of physical visitation. I put it out of my mind. convinced that it was sleep paralysis or the remnants of a dream. I decided to have breakfast in the garden. I went to unlock the kitchen door, but the door was already unlocked. I had definitely locked the door. At this point, I was really freaked out. I went over to a friend's, had some beers, stayed the night there on his couch. I returned to my grandparents a couple days later. I went for my nighttime cigarette. I saw two eyes reflecting back in the night. Two bright orange dots. It wasn't a fox this time, for sure. It was too high. It was the height of a horse on all fours. Or, my mind chilled briefly, of a deer. It didn't move. It was just placidly gazing at me. Every so often, the reflection would go, only to reappear, as if it was slowly blinking or looking away for just a second. I got really unnerved. What if it was the deer man? I threw away my cigarette, half unsmoked, locked up the doors, left the outside light on, left the hallway and staircase lights on, and went to my usual bedroom. I felt that weird electricity and pressure again inside that room, so severely worried that I changed bedrooms. I ended up in my mother's old bedroom. My old rocking crib, which had been my mother's and grandfather's crib, was in the corner. My mother's old room looks over the back garden. Feeling freaked out, I decided to stay up a while longer, and I think I just watched a film on my laptop or something. I can't remember what I actually did. I think I was probably on the internet or something, trying to make myself laugh, when I started hearing a noise. It was like grass being torn up outside. I looked out the window, and all I could see were those two same orange eyes looking up at my window. I lost it at that point. I called my uncle and demanded that he come around. That very second, he could hear how upset I was, so he said he was on his way. All this time, the orange eyes looked at me, occasionally looking away or blinking. The eyes began to move closer. It got to just the edge of the light. I could just make out the lighter gray silhouette. It was of a deer standing on two legs, just standing there, just watching. The grass tearing noise began again. The outside lights went out. The bulb somehow blew. I turned on my room lights. I heard the grass tearing noise get closer. Then I heard a clop of a hoof touching patio, a pause, and then the grass tearing noise again. At some point, I heard a car pull up outside. I felt saved. The glass rattling slam as it shut. I called out, "Hello?" I went downstairs. My uncle. He asked what was wrong. We didn't talk about it. We just played some chess, and I avoided why I was so upset altogether. In the morning, I went outside. I meant to fix a dovecote for days. I had to pass nearby this copse. I got tingles, but the light of the day emboldened me. I saw dirt, as if a horse had been digging at the ground. I just turned around and walked back into the house. And for the rest of my stay back home, I stayed at my friend's house. I did go back there, and I never saw it again, but I swear I can sometimes still hear those same noises. This happened to me when I was 14 years old. I haven't told anyone about this because we aren't supposed to talk about these things in my culture. If you talk about them, they gain an attraction toward you and will focus on you according to our beliefs. I'm a Navajo man from Arizona, and I was raised on the res. I somewhat know what they are, and I know about them. We take them very seriously. If one is seen, the Navajo police will come out to investigate the area. Anyway, I saw one. My family and I live in Arizona, and we occasionally visit a family near Farmington, New Mexico. We left early and got there by noon. It's a very long and boring trip up there. We get there before noon, and we have time to socialize and talk with our extended family. The younger kids and teens start to play and explore around until dusk. The house is too small for everyone to hang out and sleep in. Some of the kids have to sleep in the trailer and truck camper. My cousins and I stayed in the old, slightly torn tent. So it was nighttime, around 9 p.m., and all of us get ready for bed. It had been a long day, and we were tired. We were asleep at this point, and for some unknown reason, I wake up. Of course, I'm still tired and rubbing my eyes while yawning, meaning I wasn't really aware of my surroundings. Once I finish rubbing my eyes, I look at the entrance of the tent, and I see a figure illuminated by the backlight of the porch, standing in the front of the tent. At first, I was scared, but I thought it was my other cousins just messing with us. As I was thinking this, I thought, why would they go through this much trouble of staying up late just to have the off chance of us waking up and seeing them? This person was still standing outside of our tent, looking at us. I turned to one of my older cousins to wake him up and tell him that someone was standing outside of our tent. He tries to brush me off, but I persist, and he turns to me and asks what I wanted. I tell him to look at the entrance of the tent, and he does. I've never seen someone go from the brink of sleep to sheer panic that fast before or since. He looks at me with a shocked face and tells me to be quiet, be absolutely silent. He whispers to me that it's a skinwalker and we need to be very quiet. We lay there for the longest time, and from my memory, it was at least an hour or more. We were just about to go back to sleep because it hadn't done anything. Then, it started to walk around the tent at an insanely slow pace that kept us up. Remember when I said that this was an old torn tent? It had some holes in it. One of the holes was the size of a quarter, and I decided to be brave. As it continues to walk around the tent a fourth time, I slowly crawl toward the hole and try to take a look. As I did this, my cousin told me to get back to bed, or it'll hurt us. I ignored this warning. I'm at the quarter-size hole and looking out to see whatever it was. It came around to the hole, and what I saw was bone-chilling. I was looking at its lower half, not its face. What I saw were darkened, dirt-covered legs and some kind of makeshift animal pelt. I bolted back and hid under my sleeping bag while my cousin did the same. This thing decided to stop moving and start looking at us again, as if it knew that I saw it, and it was letting me know that it knew. It continues to stand still again, just at the entrance, and watch us. I hid under the covers, so scared that I believe I was in shock. I finally passed out from sheer exhaustion. I woke up early, maybe around 5 a.m., and I decided to look outside the tent to see if there was anything there. I see footprints, bare footprints. That sent shivers throughout my body. I saw the footprints move around the tent. This hit me hard because I was now realizing that it wasn't a dream. As I further investigate the footprints, I notice that it went off toward the rocky hills nearby where we were staying. I followed the track to the hills about 100 yards away from the house. As I continued to follow the tracks, something strange and frightening happened. It goes from two footprints walking for a while to footprints and handprints in the dirt. I found that strange because no person out there would do that. As I followed the tracks further into the hills, the prints started to get smaller and smaller. This is when I started to get scared again. It slowly changed into coyote paw prints. That's when I stopped and turned back home, first walking fast and then just breaking out into a sprint. When I finally got back to the house, I sat down on the back porch for a while and thought about telling my family, but I didn't think they'd believe me. In the end, I ended up not telling anyone, even the cousin that I woke up in the middle of the night. It seemed so outlandish and sounded like what a kid would tell to get attention. That's my story. My people take witchcraft very seriously and do our best not to talk about them. Even though I broke this code, I refrain from saying anything out loud. I've had a few other incidents, but this is by far the scariest. Growing up, I lived in northeastern Arizona, literally about 5 miles south of the Navajo Reservation in Winslow. Naturally, being that close to the reservation, or the res, skinwalkers were a huge topic of conversation. Amongst the locals, we all took it very seriously. Stories of personal experiences abounded. I was no different. My family had gone camping in a little spot about 50 miles or so south of a town called Hart Canyon, near Wiggins Crossing. This is if anyone is interested where it was. We had been there all day, and I was extremely familiar with the area, as we had camped there 20 or so times before, so my parents just let me wander alone in the woods. This was back in the early 90s. Anyway, I had some G.I. Joes that I had been playing with in the nearby creek, about 80 yards from our campsite. There were no other campers there with us. My mom had called me back to camp for dinner, so I left and ate. I played around camp for a while and realized that I had forgotten my toys back at the creek, so I took a flashlight and headed back that way. I knew right where I had left them, so in no time I found them and grabbed them up. As I squatted down to grab them on the edge of the water, a sudden urgency that I had never felt before ran down my spine. I remember feeling frozen because of the fear, like the little boy on E.T. when the alien comes out of the field for the first time and he's trying to scream for his family. I looked up and pointed my flashlight to the other side of the creek and about 10 yards down the way. I saw something. At first, I thought it was a deer, but it was standing up, so I thought it may be a bear, but it was too skinny and did not have enough poofy hair. It skunked behind a tree and peered out slightly at me. I seriously was too scared to move. I had just read a bit about Bigfoot for the first time since it wasn't really popular in my area. I thought for a long time that that's what I saw. I finally had seen enough to gather my wits and scramble as fast as I could back to camp. I told my parents what I saw, and they kind of dismissed it as my imagination, so I stayed close for the rest of the trip. About 2 years later, I was at my house. I had 2 dogs. They were outside dogs and lived their whole lives in my backyard. One night, they went psycho, barking first at something in the alley behind my house. Then they both started whimpering. I had my window open slightly, and one of the dogs straight up jumped up to the window, frantically chewed through the screen of the window, forced its way into the house, and would not leave for 3 days. Another time, when I was about 13, we used to play night games in the town, mostly there being nothing much else to do. We would walk around our neighborhood and act suspicious so the cops would come and chase us around, and we run down alleyways and hop into random folks' backyards to hide. Now at this time, it was extremely common to see someone drunk in the alley, so it was no big deal to see someone in the alley behind my house that night, as we, being me and 2 friends, ran from a police car that was hot on our tail. We saw him plain as day, standing in our way. We ran around him and jumped into the nearest yard to hide. We waited for the cop to pass us and hopped back out. Literally about 3 minutes went by. We ran back the way we came as we got to the point where the drunk man had been. He was gone. In his place was a coyote sitting there, watching us. We ran right past it, feet from it, and anyone who knows coyotes knows that they will bail out way before you get close to them. This bugger held his ground and calmly sat there and watched us run past him. We all freaked out and stayed inside for a month. My last experience was when I was about 15 or 16. My brother had a girlfriend who lived in a small community south of Winslow called Starlight Pines, about 25 miles-ish. Well, we went to see her one day, and as we drove out, about 15 miles out, when we saw this guy just standing on the side of the road. This was quite odd because the res was north of town, and it was rare to see anyone on foot south of town because it's just desert and forest for literally 80 miles. Anyway, we saw this guy. He looked normal enough, flannel shirt and jeans. We got to our destination and hung out with my brother's girlfriend and her family well into the night when we decided to head back home. We hopped in his truck, a Chevy S10, and drove back the same way we came. In the same spot, we saw the same dude. He was still there. I remember thinking, that dude is crazy standing out there all day and into the night. What is he doing? Right as we drove past him, we heard a loud bang on the back of the truck. At first, I thought we hit an animal, but I didn't feel anything that we'd run over. I turned around and looked out the back window. My brother started to slow down, thinking there may be something wrong with the truck. In the brake lights, I see the guy chasing after us. We were easily going 55 to 60 at this point, and we were about to stop. The guy is on the road, feet behind us. I scream at my brother to not stop, to gun it. He does, and being a Chevy S10, it had a speed governor at about 80 miles. This guy kept up with us. We are seriously freaking out. I asked my brother, what if we don't make it back to town? What if we have to slow down once we get close? After those 2 miles that stretched forever, I looked back, and he was just gone, vanished. We got home and booked it into the house and told our parents. The next morning, I get up to head somewhere, and I look at my brother's truck, thinking about the night before. I wondered what the loud bang was just before we started getting chased. Inspecting the truck, I found a handprint smeared in the dust from about 2/3 over to the right and then smeared to the right taillight. I never went out there again. Sorry this was so long, but those are my experiences with what I'm convinced were skinwalkers. So I've wanted to talk about this for a while, but I've never really just got around to writing it down, like putting pen to paper. I grew up on a fair bit of land in the floodplain. My dad owns an excavating company and uses an old farm as his base of operations. One day, during one summer when I was 14, we were working setting fence posts on a hill called a CRYPTID. This is used for keeping stuff out of the floods. Dad had an old dump truck, a lowboy trailer, and an old construction office trailer with expanded metal over the windows up there. And he wanted a fence for some reason. It was hard work because the top was covered in a layer of gravel. One of us would dig the post hole, set the post, and then the other would work with a pickaxe, getting it through the gravel layer on the next hole. We finished up pretty early in the afternoon. I played some video games. I think it may have been the original Modern Warfare 2, because I got Black Ops way later than everyone else. As it got dark, I realized I'd left my sweatshirt up on the pad. It's about a 30-minute hike from the house. By the time I got up there, it was fully dark out. There was a full moon, but heavy cloud cover, so I couldn't see much. There was also a fair bit of ground fog visible from the top of the pad. I grabbed my sweatshirt from the post that I had left it on, and I decided to take a few minutes and straighten up the tools that we left out. I figured it'd earn me some points with my dad. I was most of the way done when I happened to glance down the side of the pad. It was about 20 feet below, when the moon was out from the clouds, and I saw what I thought at first was a coyote. They usually tend to avoid being anywhere near people, so I assumed that this guy hasn't noticed me, and I held still so I could see it better without spooking it. At this point, the creature stood on its hind legs, and what I'd assumed was a coyote stood at least 12 feet tall, judging from a 4-foot top strand of wire fence that it was next to in elevation relative to me. Its body and legs looked like a starved canine, but the head was much flatter, but still with a long snout. It stuck its front legs out and kind of in front of itself for balance or whatever, I don't know. I froze for a second, and then I grabbed the pickaxe from where I had leaned it up against the lowboy and noped into the old construction trailer. I was completely ignoring my fear of spiders, and I shut the door behind me. I sat there in the dark for over an hour. I was too terrified at first to even check my phone in case the light would draw whatever that thing was. When I finally got together some courage, I used my phone screen for light. It was a little flip phone, so not much, and I pulled back the shutters just a little to look out the windows. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't out there that I could see. I clutched the pickaxe, ready to strike as I pushed the door open with my foot. I was expecting it to be hiding right there, but it wasn't, and I made it back to the house in 20 minutes. I thanked God the terrain was all open and flat. If this had been forested, there was no way I would have gone back in the dark. I ended up just telling my dad that I brought the pickaxe back because I thought the handle was loose. My mom gave me a light scolding for taking so long because dinner was ready by then, but generally everything was okay. I assumed that I must have seen a coyote, a regular one, and somehow it had just gotten out of perspective, but I still felt weird about the whole thing, and after that I never felt quite comfortable going out at night. So fast forward about 2 years later. I was 16 now, and I was over at my friend's place with my dad and a couple of his buddies. My friend's grandpa is telling us stories of the old days. Tractors, dragline excavators, and dynamite made repeated features. He gets talking about a pulp forest that extends down into the valley from the slope. It's bordering on some of our land. He goes quiet for a moment, and then asks us if we want to hear a scary story. Of course, we say yes. Dad and his buddies are listening as well. He talked about how he went out hunting ducks on the banks of one of the ponds. This was after a particularly big flood. He goes on for a while, but then the part that I remembered word for word was, "And then I smelled something bad, like rotted meat. You know that rotten meat smell? Well, I went and followed it along this path, through all them pulp trees. Damned if I didn't find the strangest thing I'd ever seen in my life. It looked like a dog, but the size of a big bull. Skinny though, no muscle, and the damned ugliest, most evil-looking face I had ever seen. It was like a Rottweiler with most of the fur gone. The thing was dead, of course, or I thought it was, but I still just got the hell out of there, fast as my legs could carry me. I didn't want it stuffed, I just wanted out of there. The thing looked evil." I looked over at my dad and his buddies. They were all staring at each other, rigid as hell. Everyone knew what each other had seen at some point or another. One of our neighbors has had disappearing cows, but other than that, I've never again seen this creature. From that point on, though, my dad always made sure that the doors were locked at night. I put a dresser and a bookshelf across my window. So I've lived basically my entire life in a former coal mining town. The town is pretty big. It's a whole county actually, but only out of the town was the mining business big. Mostly in town, all you get is a military training camp, farming, and sports. There's a county fair too that's pretty popular, but whatever. So anyway, most of the old mine shafts that were started and ended shortly after they were made were mostly filled up so nobody could get in there. So geocaching became really popular around this time that this happened. And of course there's always mine shafts that are not properly closed off, and it turns out that these were the locations for a lot of geocaches in the area. So generally people would go there, get the cache, leave something, and then leave. Not that big of an issue. It was always warm near the mine shafts, so snow would melt slowly near the fronts of them, making them great for year-round geocaching. So now, we start the actual story. Myself and 3 friends and one of their girlfriends all get kinda drunk in the afternoon after our senior year. So there's myself, Alex, Brian, Colton, and Gia. And yes, I'm aware that they line up with A, B, and C. So Gia is a big hiker type. She's very fit, and she loves to geocache. Her boyfriend, Colton, is into local history, and is also kind of a dork, but so is she, so they really fit well together, especially with the geocaching. Colton wants to go to one of the bigger, more remote mine shafts, just for shits and giggles. Gia absolutely agrees. And me being the mother hen of this story, which basically means that I was only slightly buzzed, as in I had 2 beers and they all had a lot more, so I drove them all out there. Brian was having fun with it, so he brought out a few of his hunting guns, which ranged from a rifle to a shotgun and a couple pistols. I jokingly took the shotgun and just started making Evil Dead quotes the entire time. However, nobody else is really interested in taking a gun besides me, and I am weird enough to just keep it in my hands and continue making Evil Dead quotes as we go along. When we got there, it was kind of warm, which felt good since it was starting to get dark and colder. If I had to guess, I would have said it was around 8 p.m., and since it was June, it was just light out. So Gia and Colton say how there's a metal gate on the front of the mine, like one you'd see in a storage room, and it kind of looked new. Colton pauses and says that this is not normal for the mines. Gia suggests that they're finally putting another layer onto the front of the mine since people were getting into them. It had a star logo with a circle around it, just like it was a cheesy government movie. Brian gets all cocky and tries to jank up the metal door by its small handle. He in turn touches the door and yelps in pain as he pulls his hand back. Apparently, the metal door was so hot that it was hard to move your hand toward it. We didn't have a proper explanation for it. We all just assumed it was some kind of fumes from the cave heating up the door like a frying pan or something similar like that. So to be funny, I threw a large stick at the door, and as it leaned against it, it started burning up. It hadn't even been that long since the stick hit it with a loud bang. The fire wasn't normal though. The fire was blue. Like blue as if it was a giant pilot light, just coming off of a stick thrown at this hot as hell door. We all thought that it was really weird, so we threw more sticks at it and got a bit of a small fire going of blue and greenish hues. Colton kind of guessed that it was maybe the gas from the cave doing it, but he didn't really know, and I don't think he really cared. As our fire was going, it was beginning to get dark, so we were going to head out back home. And then we heard something, a very large metallic creaking noise. It sounded like something out of a video game, with just how it sounded so strong and yet fizzled out so quickly. This metal gate then fell off of its hinges onto the ground, crushing the blue fire pretty quick. We looked inside of the mine shaft that was there, Gia using her phone as sort of like a binoculars trying to zoom in, which caused her to scream and then run back to the car. I looked into the mine, and among the dim blue fire, I saw this, a blob of tannish-grayed skin being illuminated just enough by the fire so I could see it. It was shiny like stone, but leathery in different areas. The more we looked, the more that we could make out almost 7 different faces down there. Some of them seemed to be a kind of red hue. We slowly noticed that these things, or one thing, or however many there were moving closer. Brian decided to start shooting at it without even worrying about anything. We could hear the thing in there start coughing and hacking, or however many there were. It was breathing hard and strained, and through the dim light, we could see small bits of what looked like black liquid coming out of its mouth from the looks of the lighting. I took up the job of shooting off a grand total of 2 shots that were in the gun, attempting to reload, but then I just gave up and decided to go back to the car with Alex, Brian, and Colton and Gia. All of us were very jumpy during the whole ride home. After we calmed down, we kind of started thinking we were badasses, those teenage hormones and stuff. Eventually, we realized that we most likely uncovered some weird-ass stuff in the middle of the woods, like a C-tier horror movie. We tried not to speak of it again, besides just passing remarks. As the years went by, everyone else moved or tried to move out of the town. Gia and Colton left together, Alex went to college, Brian has pretty much given up on hunting and sticks to a range this time. I tried looking up the mine long after this, and I literally only found it on an old map of the town from the late 1890s from some site that sells maps. I tried finding it again, only to find that the site had been taken down or didn't exist anymore. I looked up the public city hall records about the mines. I found it on there. I bookmarked it, only to go back later and find it removed, saying that this document doesn't exist. Basically, I was in your standard, quote, group of friends, find a creepy creature, and now there's no trace of it, type of dumb horror movie. "2017 was, by all intents and purposes, the second worst year of my entire life. During this low period, my best friend Martin offers to take me out hunting with him. And if you're wondering where we went, it was Clark County, Alabama. It was on some land that he was paying to hunt on. It was an absolutely beautiful experience. I shot my own 8-point buck on the first night out. I felt so relaxed the entire time. So fast forward to 2018, my best friend invites me out again. A month or two before we head out, a huge storm hits the area. When we arrive, the vibe is very different. It's not the same place as it was before. It just feels very off. That serene feeling that I enjoyed before is missing. The first night, he drops me off at a place he calls the Patch. It's a bare patch of grass that forms a donut around a series of smaller trees in the middle. There's woodland for miles surrounding the hunting post. He leaves to go hunt in another area pretty far off. He tells me that he'll be back at 8 p.m. to pick me up. It's 4:30 when he drops me off. The post that I'm in is one of the shittiest ones I've ever been in. There's only one person that can fit in there. The walls are super thin. There's 4 windows, one in the front and 2 on either side, and a very small one on the back. The door, if you can call it that, to get in this thing was only locked by a small hook, and it was barely on its hinges. This didn't bother me at the time because there's no predators in the area besides some big hogs. I decided to sit down and chill since I'm gonna be there a while, and I was only going to shoot a deer if I could tell it was a cow horn. Read inbred and a genetic dead end. A few things to note: I had a hunting knife that Martin gifted me, and one of his rifles with a few bullets in case I needed to take a second shot, a thermoscope, and a high-powered flashlight. There was no cell phone reception. I found that out when I tried texting someone. Some of the other areas can have spotty reception, albeit very poor. I decided to just chill and enjoy the ambience. It was a very pretty afternoon. A few clouds were out. Squirrels were jumping around. Trees were rustling. The usual. Just as the sun was beginning to set, the ambience drastically changes. All the trees stop rustling. No squirrels. No wind. Everything just goes silent. Suddenly, I feel dread, and my body begins to tense up. From behind me, I can hear something walking toward me. It did not sound like a deer or some hog or anything else. Its gait reminded me of a human's walking through the woods at a pace that implied that it was stalking something. I remained perfectly still, making sure that my breathing is steady. I keep my eyes fixed ahead. My hand instinctively grips my knife that's strapped to my chest. Whatever is behind me keeps moving closer, making no noise besides the footsteps that crunch the leaves. It was still fairly sunny outside, but I did not want to look at it. It moves to my right and stops right by that window. Then it starts exhaling, not inhaling and exhaling, just exhaling. It was raspy and heavy, like someone had just ran a marathon, but it was inhumanly deep. Something primal inside my mind was screaming at me to not look at it, that if I did look at it, I felt like I was going to die. It sits there, just exhaling and looking at me, while I sit like a statue for several minutes. And then it's gone. No running away, no walking away, no leaves crunching in the distance, just silence again. I stay perfectly still, not wanting to move. And then gradually, the ambience returns. The wind begins to rustle the leaves. The squirrels are moving again. I even see a family of deer appear. I'm too freaked out to leave. I don't even know where my friend is, and I can't call him. All I can do is wait. Beyond my paranoia getting to me, nothing else happens. My friend ends up picking me up an hour late because he took a shot at a buck and was waiting to see if he would come back. When we get back to our cabin, I spill my beans. He's scared and gets chills. Then he proceeds to tell me about what happened to his little brother just a few years prior. And that part of the story goes like this. So Daniel's little brother is named Daniel. Daniel, Martin, and their dad were all on a hunting trip. They were hunting in a different area called the Meadow. It's an area with extremely tall grass and a patch that leads off into the forest. The hunting stand is raised pretty far off the ground, probably 8 to 10 feet. While hunting, Daniel's chilling on his phone when the same thing happens. The wind stops. The grass stops rustling. There's no more animal ambience. And then he hears footsteps approach him from the tall grass. There's only one window on the stand, and it doesn't look at the surrounding fields. The footsteps slowly walk up to the stand and then stop directly beneath him. He freaks out and starts texting his family to come get him immediately. He's too scared to call or make any noise. Martin and his dad drive out to get him, and they find nothing underneath the stand. Daniel never hunted in that area ever again. The strange thing is that Martin and I hunted there before, and nothing happened. So fast forward to 2019, Martin invites me again to go hunting with him and Daniel. This time, I had other stuff going on, so I politely refused. While chilling in the cabin late that night, both of them hear knocking on the side of the wall near the living room. 3 knocks in normal succession. Martin goes out to see what could be making that noise, armed, of course. He finds nothing. Not even 30 minutes later, the same knocks occur in the living room where they are. Once again, he goes out, but there's still nothing there. No tree branch, no anything near the cabin that could be making the noise. And keep in mind too, this cabin is in the middle of nowhere. There isn't another house or cabin in the area for at least another mile. And out of all of us, if there was anybody who would shoot someone, it's probably Martin. I've seen him get into and come back from some pretty hairy situations. But that event shook Martin and his little brother. Conveniently, they ended their hunting lease, to put it that way, and then they purchased their own property in Mississippi, and now they hunt there. I have no idea what happened. Neither does he. It doesn't seem like a Bigfoot story or anything else I've ever heard of. The whole thing is just really weird. Back when I was 17, I went to stay with my uncle who owned a ranch in Idaho for the winter. My parents were older and had to be in their late 40s. So my uncle, Dad's older brother, is close to 60 and more like a grandpa than anything. He's been married and divorced twice and has been living alone for almost my entire life. I live in Mesa, Arizona, so the drive was absolutely grueling. My uncle picked me up in October of 2018. He's super tall and a big-ass dude with a massive beard. He's super chill, but really rough looking. His ranch is in the middle of nowhere, with no neighbors for miles, I think. When I got there, it was kind of exactly how I thought it would be. Super old school, kinda run down looking. Even from just driving in, I noticed something different. He had a long line of rocks lining the end of his property that were all painted white. I asked him about them, and he told me that he would tell me in a minute. As soon as we got in the house, he told me that there are rules when staying with them, and if I broke them, he would have no problem driving me all the way back home. He said I couldn't go out any time after sundown without him, under any circumstance. At night, I needed to have my curtains drawn at all times, the lights off. If I needed a light, I had to use a candle that he kept next to the bed. He took me outside and pointed to the white rocks and said that the rocks went around the entire property and have been there even before he lived there. He told me never to go over the rocks or go anywhere far from the house without him. I was kind of spooked, and I asked him why, and all he said was like, "Oh, there's a lot of coyotes around, and they can kill you if they kinda gang up on you." The first night was fine, except for the awful bed. The next day, he asked if I wanted to have fun and took me out back to shoot. A few weeks go by, fine, just hanging out and having bonfires, shooting and helping him on the property. I end up getting into pretty decent shape just helping him. And then, in the middle of November, we woke up to find a dead deer in the yard. My uncle flips his shit. He grabs me and puts me in the house and starts to lock the doors and the windows. He tells me to grab my shit and keep it near the door. I ask him to please tell me what the hell is going on, but he doesn't. He has me sleep in the living room on a pull-out couch while he sleeps in the chair. The next few days, it's like he's a totally different person. He's on edge and super paranoid. I end up sleeping in the living room for a week until he chills, and all is calm. Thanksgiving rolls around, and we cook up a turkey and a bunch of other frozen stuff that he had in the freezer. We stuff ourselves, and he even lets me have a few beers. We're chilling by the fire and talking about the time he got into a fight with a guy over his ex-wife while listening to his old records, when suddenly a shit ton of loud noises came out of nowhere. We both shoot up. He runs for the door. I follow after him and end up running full speed into the back of him and falling over. He had stopped at the door and started locking the locks. I thought he was running outside, so I ran full speed. He tells me to grab his shotgun. I'm freaked out at this point because my massive badass of an uncle is absolutely losing his shit. The loud noises outside sound like barking, they sound like yelling, and someone hitting a metal trash can. It's all mixed together, and it's a weird garble of noises. And then, the window breaks. A massive rock was thrown through it. It was one of the painted white rocks. I'm freaking out now. My uncle shoots out the window. My ears are ringing, and I'm crying at this point. He tells me to grab a table and put it against the window. I put it against the window while he runs to his room. He comes back out with his rifle, and he hands it to me. He tells me if I see anything, to not hesitate to shoot it. I ask him if we should just call the cops, but he tells me that they would never get here in time. It would be at least a few hours. All night, we sit in the living room listening to whatever this thing is destroy the porch and pound on the door. As soon as the sun comes up, my uncle goes to the door and starts to unlock it. I start to freak out, like WTF are you doing? They're still there. He rips the door open, and there's nothing. I'm absolutely shitting my pants, thinking of all the stories that I've read on the internet about monsters and cryptids and everything else. The door is absolutely destroyed on the outside. It's super scratched up. There's chunks missing. The porch has pieces missing, and his truck has all the windows smashed and the tires are shredded. It looks like a bomb went off outside. My uncle looks around and sighs. I ask him, what the hell was that? He looks at me and tells me, oh, there's a gang that comes around and does this type of stuff to people's houses. I say, a gang? Why are you lying to me? What's actually going on? He basically tells me something to the effect of shut the F up and relax. I don't believe him in the slightest, and I can see that he's kicking himself for telling such an awful, shitty lie. I go to take a picture of the door outside, and he grabs my phone and says no. I say, what the hell? He tells me that if my mother saw what happened, she would kill him. He tells me to relax and that it's okay. We clean up the porch, and he has me help him replace his tires with a few old ones from the shed. We limp the truck back to town for him to get replacement tires and ask about the windows. Everyone in town is staring hard at us like we just drove into town on a clown car. It's a small town with a cafe/diner, gas station, mechanic, general store, and a motel. Everyone knows each other for the most part. The gas station clerk comes out and starts to talk to my uncle. The clerk and my uncle are talking quietly, and I can see the clerk is upset. I overhear him say, well, what did you expect? It's getting worse every year, man. At this point, I think, okay, WTF. He takes me back to the house and tells me that the gang that he was talking about was real, but they're more like vandals and tweakers. I still don't believe him in the slightest, but I act like I do for his peace of mind. That night, my uncle was surprisingly calm and told me that they wouldn't come back 2 nights in a row. The night was calm, except for this weird feeling in the air. It was almost like static or electricity, like the whole place would blow up if the littlest thing happened. I woke up really late to my uncle snoring in his chair. I had to go to the bathroom super bad. The fire had died out, so I used my phone light to make my way to the bathroom. The bathroom is super small, with a tiny window at the top of the back wall. This is also right behind the toilet. I get to the bathroom, and I turn on the light to piss. While I'm doing my business, I start hearing this weird noise. It's like the tiniest scratching sound. I quickly realize it's coming from the window, and then it turns into tapping. I'm so terrified, I'm just frozen there. If I wasn't already peeing, I'd definitely be doing it now. And then I realize I really screwed up. I turned the light on when I'm supposed to be using a candle. I start shaking, and then the window breaks and the glass hits me. I see this awful pale hand reach through the broken window. Screaming, I back out of the bathroom, pissing all over my legs and pants. I didn't even look back at the window. I just ran down the hall, trying to pull my pants up. My uncle runs around the corner and grabs me. He yells at me, "What happened? What happened?" while I try to yell back what did indeed happen. He sees the light on and runs to shut it off. He then yells, "I thought I made it effing clear about the lights at night." I'm crying, digging through my duffel bag looking for new pants. The next day, we leave. He drives me home, saying it just will be safer if I wasn't there. He told me not to ever tell my parents because they would absolutely freak out, and I don't blame them. He stayed at the house with us for a few days, and eventually we both chilled out again. The way I see it, I was a kid back then. I was only 17. I'm older now. I have more experience. I want to go back and see if he'll let me take pictures, set up a camera, or maybe even help him deal with whatever is plaguing his property. I don't really know what to think, since he won't tell me really anything about what happened. It's not like some other stories that you see on the internet where it's talking and whispering or copying voices. Whatever this is just violent. And I was scared back then, but I'm not scared anymore.